Quiet luxury mom printed my villa on 200 invites. I leased a $150,000 shoot, and the sheriff ended it. My name is Cassidy Hale, and the quiet hum of the Tesla's electric engine was the only sound as I turned onto the crushed shell driveway. It was Tuesday. I should have been downtown, in a glass-walled conference room at Northbridge Capital, dissecting the risk profile of a Brazilian logistics firm. Instead, I was here under the crisp October sky of Greywater Bay because the final deck for that presentation was sitting on my home office desk. A simple mistake, a forgotten file. I killed the engine, and the silence of the coast rushed in, broken only by the distant cry of a gull and the rhythmic sigh of the surf against the shore. This place, this house, was my sanctuary, built by my grandmother, Catherine, with timber, stone, and a will that matched the rugged coastline. It was the one corner of the world that was unequivocally mine, a fortress of solitude I had inherited, paid the taxes on, and maintained with my own two hands and the healthy salary my 60-hour work weeks afforded me. The front door was ajar, a sliver of warmth and light spilling onto the blue stone porch. Strange, I never left it open. A prickle of unease, the low-grade hum of a variable in the wrong column, ran up my spine. I pushed the heavy oak door inward, and then I heard them. Voices, not the hushed tones of an intruder, but the bright, confident chatter of people who believed they belonged. They were in my dining room. "No, Margaret, the hydrangeas are too much, too provincial. We need something classic. White roses, peonies, maybe thousands of them. Leia, darling, we have to consider the sea air. Roses will wilt before the I-dos are even done. We need something hardier. It's a family tradition. After all, the Hales have always had gardenias by the sea. My mother, Margaret Hale, and my younger sister, Leia. I stood frozen in the foyer, my leather briefcase slipping in my suddenly slick palm. The presentation, the Brazilian firm, the entire world of structured finance evaporated, replaced by the immediate, violating reality of my mother and sister planning a wedding in my house without me, without my permission. My dining room table, a solid piece of reclaimed oak I'd spent a month sourcing, was covered in a topography of bridal magazines, fabric swatches, and cake designs on an iPad. Margaret was holding a swatch of ivory silk against a champagne-colored ribbon, her brow furrowed in the same theatrical concentration she applied to seating charts at charity galas. Leia, my beautiful, perpetually innocent sister, was scrolling through a Pinterest board titled Seaside Dream Wedding. The phrase hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. "The family house," my mother had said twice. It wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was a statement of policy, a policy I had never agreed to. It was a tiny needle, expertly slid into the same nerve it had been striking for 34 years. My eyes scanned the beautiful mess on my table. Tucked beside a 3-tiered cake model was a stack of elegant cream-colored cardstock. I could make out the calligraphy from where I stood. Leia Hale and Evan Cole request the pleasure of your company. And below it, my address. The date was 6 weeks from now. A small, neatly printed number in the corner read 200. 200 guests. Here. A tremor started in my hands, a low-frequency vibration of pure, unadulterated rage, but my face remained placid. My training took over. In my world, panic is a liability. Emotion is a risk to be quantified and mitigated. I didn't explode. I didn't rush in, screaming about boundaries and ownership. I went cold. The fury didn't vanish, it crystallized, hardening into something sharp, clear, and infinitely more dangerous. My silence was no longer acquiescence, it was bait. I slipped my phone from my pocket and did a quick, silent search. There it was, a post from my mother on Instagram, 3 days old, a stunning, professionally shot photo of my house at sunset, the windows glowing like embers. The caption read, "So thrilled to continue a beautiful family tradition at our seaside home for Leia's wedding. Some places are just in our blood. Hashtag Hale Legacy, hashtag Family Home, the Greywater Bay Wedding, our seaside home." The scene cut in my mind, a jarring jump back to last Tuesday, a family dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant downtown, one of those places with more foam than food. It was ostensibly to celebrate Leia's engagement. Evan Cole, the fiancé, sat beside her, radiating a practiced, easy charm. My father was there, a quiet, peripheral figure, content to let Margaret orchestrate the evening, as he had let her orchestrate their entire lives. Then, over dessert, Margaret had tapped her water glass with a spoon, a gesture that always preceded an imperial decree. "I have the most wonderful news," she'd announced to the table, her voice carrying to the surrounding diners, friends of hers who had been strategically invited. "Cassidy, in her infinite generosity, has offered us the family house for the wedding. It's just so perfect, a true Hale wedding, right where it's meant to be." Every eye at the table, and several from nearby tables, turned to me, a spotlight of expectation, a silent, immense pressure to perform the role I had always been assigned, the stable, responsible, accommodating older daughter. To deny it would be to create a scene, to brand myself as selfish, cruel. To correct her, to say, "You mean my house, and you never asked," was an act of social violence I wasn't prepared to commit in that moment. So I smiled, a tight, bloodless smile, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Checkmate!" Her friends beamed. My father looked relieved. Leia clapped her hands in delight. They saw my nod as confirmation. I saw it as the moment I started logging evidence. Now, standing in my own foyer, an uninvited guest in my own life, I could see the full scope of the campaign. A magazine article a friend had texted me last week, a fluffy piece in Seattle Coast, living on legacy families of Greywater Bay, featured a picture of my parents and Leia with a caption mentioning the historic Hale family estate, soon to host the wedding of the year. My house, which I inherited directly from my grandmother, not them, my legacy, reframed as theirs. I took a quiet step back into the shadow of the hallway. I didn't want to be seen, not yet. I was still gathering data from the dining room. Leia's voice, sweet and untroubled. "Evan found the most incredible dress, Mom. It's Vera Wang, $8,000, but he said I'm worth it." "Of course you are, my love," Margaret cooed. "Evan is such a dear, so successful." Evan Cole. I'd met him 3 times. He spoke in vague, impressive-sounding terms about his work, something to do with a private fund for high-net-worth clients. He wore a watch that was a little too big, laughed a little too loudly. He looked at my mother more than he looked at Leia. My internal risk assessment of him was a flashing red light. He was a leveraged asset with no underlying collateral. My mind dredged up a lifetime of similar moments, a long, gray reel of memories, not of abuse, never anything so clear-cut, but a quieter, more insidious form of erosion. Me at 12, being told to help Leia with her science project all weekend because she was the creative one and I was the responsible one. Me at 17, giving up my spot on a summer trip to Europe because the money was needed for Leia's elite riding camp. Me in my 20s co-signing for Leia's first apartment because my credit was perfect and hers was, in my mother's words, a work in progress. Each time, it was framed not as a sacrifice, but as my natural duty. I wasn't a person, I was a resource, the family's designated adult. I had to get the file. I took a deep, steadying breath and stepped out of the shadows, forcing a look of mild surprise onto my face. "Mom, what are you guys doing here?" Their heads snapped up. Margaret's face, for a fraction of a second, registered a flicker of annoyance, the look of a general whose sovereign territory had been unexpectedly entered, but it vanished instantly, replaced by a brilliant, dazzling smile. "Cassidy, darling, we were just getting a head start on some planning. The time is just flying by," she said, rising to give me an air kiss that smelled of Chanel and entitlement. "I just came back to grab a file I forgot for work," I said, my voice even, calm. My gaze drifted over the mountain of wedding paraphernalia. "Wow, you've been busy, isn't it wonderful?" Leia chirped, oblivious. "Mom has the most amazing ideas for the flowers on the veranda." I nodded slowly, my eyes meeting my mother's. "It's a lot of work and a lot of people. 200 guests. That's a big event for a residential property. We'll need to talk about the event. Insurance, vendor contracts, liability waivers." I let the words hang in the air. They were my world: contracts, liability, paperwork, the unglamorous, ironclad scaffolding that holds everything up. Margaret waved a dismissive, perfectly manicured hand, her smile a weapon, expensive and sharp. "Oh, Cassidy, don't be so pragmatic. It's a family party, not a corporate merger. We'll handle all the little details. You just worry about your work. We'll handle it." The royal we. That was it, the final data point I needed. It wasn't an oversight, it was a hostile takeover, executed with floral arrangements and champagne ribbons. "Right," I said, producing a small, polite smile of my own. The file. I'll just be a minute. I walked past them, through my home, and up the stairs to my office. I found the presentation, slipped it into my briefcase, and walked back down. They were already re-immersed in their discussion, my presence a forgotten interruption. I let myself out, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. Back in my car, I didn't start the engine. I just sat, the leather cool against my skin. I looked at the house, my house. The afternoon sun was catching the west-facing windows, making them gleam. I saw the strong, clean lines of the roof against the sky, a roof I had paid to have replaced 2 years ago. My fury was gone, burned away by the cold, clean oxygen of purpose. They thought my silence was weakness. They thought my pragmatism was a character flaw to be managed and dismissed. They had made a critical error. They had assessed the risk and gotten it completely, catastrophically wrong. I pulled out my phone, ignoring the unread emails from my team. I opened my calendar and navigated to the weekend of the wedding, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I created a new event, blocking out all 3 days from dawn until midnight. I typed in the title, On-Site Project, Mandatory. Then I put the car in reverse and pulled away, the shells of my own driveway crunching under the wheels. The bluff had been called, and I was about to show them my hand. The drive back to my apartment in Seattle was an exercise in controlled breathing. The crystalline rage I felt in Greywater Bay hadn't thawed, it had simply been moved to cold storage. My mind, trained to identify, quantify, and neutralize risk, was already segmenting the problem: assumption, misrepresentation, trespass, liability. My calendar alert pinged, 10 a.m., Brazil Logistics Deep Dive. I pulled over, the city skyline gray and indifferent across the water, and typed a quick message to my team. Something urgent has come up. Take the lead. I'll review the minutes by end-of-day pivot to risk profile 4A. I didn't go to the office. I drove downtown, but to a different kind of tower, the King County Recorder's office. This wasn't an act of self-doubt. I knew I owned the house, I paid the mortgage, a small one I'd taken out for renovations, and the astronomical property taxes. I knew what my grandmother Catherine's will said, but in my profession, knowing is subjective, proving is objective. I needed the certified, government-stamped, undeniable proof. The clerk, a woman who looked bored by the very concept of gravity, took my parcel number. 10 minutes and $40 later, I was holding a crisp, clean copy of the statutory warranty deed. I stood in the sterile hallway, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and read the legal text: Grantor, Catherine Hale, an unmarried woman, as her separate estate. Grantee, Cassidy Hale, an unmarried woman, as her separate estate. I scanned the entire document. My mother's name, Margaret, was not on it. My father's name was not on it. There were no covenants, no trusts, no riders mentioning family use or Hale legacy. There was only Catherine's signature and mine. It was a clean, simple transfer of title. A fortress, just as she'd intended. I folded the document, the raised seal a hard little bump under my thumb, and slipped it into my briefcase next to the Brazil presentation. It was the first piece of my counter-narrative. My next call wasn't to a high-priced corporate firm. I drove to a small coffee shop in Ballard, sat in my car, and dialed a local Greywater Bay number. Marilyn Shaw, her voice answered, like gravel and strong coffee. Marilyn, it's Cassidy Hale. Cassidy, don't tell me you're calling about the church bake sale, because I'm already 2 pies deep. Marilyn Shaw was 70, retired from the state attorney's office, and the sharpest legal mind on the coast. We'd bonded over a shared love of brutally early mornings and a mutual disdain for bad espresso at the local cafe. I wish, I said, I'm calling for advice. I have a boundary issue that's escalating into a property rights violation. A pause. Family? Family. Go on. I laid it out, sticking to the facts. The uninvited planning session, the printed invitations with my address, the 200 guest count, the articles and social media posts claiming it as a family estate, the public ambush at the restaurant, the dismissal of my concerns about liability. I kept my voice flat, the tone of a risk analyst presenting a findings report. Marilyn was quiet for a long time. I could hear the faint sound of an NPR broadcast in her kitchen. Well, hell, she said finally. They're not just crossing a line, Cassidy. They're staging an occupation. Legally, it's simple. It's your house. You tell them no. You put up a no trespassing sign. You call the sheriff if they show up. I know, I said. But the social and reputational fallout, My mother is a master of public relations. She's already framed me as the generous host. If I just say no, I'm the villain, the cruel, ungrateful daughter who ruined her sister's perfect day. Ah, Marilyn's voice sharpened. So it's not a legal problem, it's a strategic one. They've built a narrative. You need a better one. One built on facts, not assumptions. Exactly. They've put you in a box where your only move is to detonate the entire relationship. So, you need a third option, a move they don't see coming. Start gathering your facts, Cassidy. Hard facts, not she said, but I have the recording. Is that legal? Washington is a two-party consent state for private conversations, I said, unless you're in a place where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. Your kitchen, your living room, that's debatable, but if you're recording on your own property and they have no reasonable expectation of privacy because they aren't supposed to be there discussing this, it gets murky. A better way? I asked. What's the better way? Put up a sign. This property is under 24-hour audio and video surveillance. A small one by the door, that's your consent. Then install your system. Let them walk right past it. The call ended. I didn't buy a sign. That was too overt. It would tip my hand. But Marilyn had given me the kernel of the idea. I didn't need to debate them. I needed to document their assumptions. That evening, I did the digital deep dive. This wasn't the casual, shocked search from the day before. This was an excavation. I archived the Seattle Coast Living article and my mother's Instagram post using a web capture tool that logged the date and URL. Then I went deeper. I found the Facebook page of my mother's closest friend, Cynthia Davies. A public post showed a photo of her and my mother clinking champagne glasses on my back porch, with the caption, "Celebrating Leia's engagement at the gorgeous Hale estate in Greywater. Margaret is a miracle worker pulling this wedding together so fast. Hashtag Hale Legacy." I saved it. I found the caterer's website. They had a blog post, thrilled to be selected for the Hale Cole wedding at their magnificent private bayfront property. I saved it. I cross-referenced the vendors Leia had tagged, the florist, the rental company, all referred to it as the Hale family property. My mother hadn't just told them, she had briefed them. She was building a commercial consensus that this was her venue. The next step was harder. I needed to hear it from them. I drove back to Greywater Bay the next afternoon, timing my arrival for 3 p.m. I knew my mother's schedule. Tuesday was her planning day with Leia. I parked down the street, out of sight, and texted my mother, heading to the coast to pick up my grandmother's silver. "Forgot it's Tuesday. Just running in. Don't get up. I'll be 5 minutes." I let myself in the back door through the mudroom. As predicted, they were in the dining room again, the table now a sea of linen samples. "Cassidy? Back again?" Margaret called out, her voice bright but laced with the distinct annoyance of an interruption. "Just grabbing the silver," I called back. I moved quickly, my briefcase in hand. "Don't mind me, I went to the dining room, hutch, opened it, and pretended to rummage. While my back was turned, I slipped a small, voice-activated digital recorder, the kind reporters use, wafer-thin, under the hutch itself, adhering it to the underside. I went to the living room. "Just checking the fireplace flue," I called. I knelt, pretending to look up the chimney, and slid a second recorder behind a heavy, seldom-moved antique speaker. The last one went in the kitchen, tucked magnetically up under the vent hood. "Got it," I said, holding up a random silver serving spoon. "You two have fun. Looks complicated." "It is, darling," my mother said, already turning back to a swatch of dove gray. "But it will be worth it." I left. I didn't retrieve the recorders for 2 days. On Thursday night, in my silent Seattle apartment, I plugged the recorders into my laptop, put on my best noise-canceling headphones, and pressed play. I built the micro-dossier, just as the outline in my head suggested, a new document file, Greywater Evidence Log.docx. I didn't just listen, I transcribed, noting the time, speaker, and tone. Speaker, Leia, tone, hesitant. "Mom, are you sure Cassidy is okay with us moving all her office furniture into the garage? That big desk? It looks really important. And what about her files?" Speaker, Margaret, tone, dismissive, amused. "Darling, it's just work. This is her family. She needs to learn priorities. It's not a suggestion. We are moving it. The contractor needs that entire room for the bridal suite setup. We'll just put all her boxes in storage for a month. She'll get over it. She's pragmatic. She'll see it makes sense." My stomach tightened. She's pragmatic. The word she used to neuter me? I scrolled to another file. A phone call, my mother clearly on speaker, talking to a vendor. Speaker, Margaret. Tone, imperious, charming. The 28th is perfect. Yes, 6 a.m. set up. The staff entrance is around the back. Don't worry about my older daughter, Cassidy. She technically owns the house, yes, but it's a family property. She'll pout for a day about the fuss, but she wouldn't dare say no. It would look absolutely terrible for her. She knows her duty. There it was, the thesis of her entire operation. She wouldn't dare say no. My duty, my supposed fear of looking terrible. She wasn't just planning a wedding, she was leveraging my entire personality, my stability, my aversion to conflict, my pragmatism, as unpaid collateral for her social ambitions. I saved the audio files and encrypted the drive. I created 3 backups, one on a local SSD, one on my secure cloud server, and one on a thumb drive I dropped into my fireproof safe. I saved the transcriptions and printed a hard copy, which I placed with the certified deed. The dossier was complete. The next morning, I called Marilyn Shaw. I have the documentation, I said, social media, vendor communications, and audio. It's exactly what we thought. The core assumption is, and I quote, "She wouldn't dare say no." Excellent, Marilyn said, the satisfaction in her voice palpable. They're operating on social contracts. You are now operating on property law. They've built their entire plan on a foundation of sand, your presumed compliance. You're about to replace that sand with steel. So, I send a cease and desist? I asked. I send them the audio files? I confront them? Absolutely not, Marilyn snapped. A cease and desist is a warning. A confrontation is a negotiation. You're done warning and you're finished negotiating. You don't argue with them. You don't talk to them at all. You make your move, and you let them discover it. What move? You're a risk analyst, Cassidy. So analyze. Their entire event is dependent on one single asset, your house, an asset you control. So you execute a prior claim on that asset. I don't follow, I said. Marilyn's voice was cold, clean, and perfect. You sign an exclusive, ironclad, fully insured rental contract for the exact dates of that wedding. You lease your property to a legitimate, insured third-party business. When your mother shows up on that Friday with a truck full of flowers, she won't be arguing with her pragmatic daughter. She'll be trespassing on a commercial agreement, and she'll be doing it in front of the police, who you will have pre-notified. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't just a strategy. It was a legal, contractual, and utterly impersonal removal of their foundation. It wasn't an emotional explosion. It was a controlled demolition. Marilyn, I said, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I thought you'd like it, she replied. Now go find a renter. I didn't waste time. My search for a renter took precisely 45 minutes. I wasn't looking for a vacationer on a short-term rental site. I was looking for a corporate client, a legitimate, insured, professional entity that would not buckle under social pressure. I found Coastal Frame, LLC, a high-end commercial photography firm based in Seattle, specializing in architectural and luxury interior catalogs. Their portfolio was immaculate, clean lines, dramatic light, and million-dollar properties presented as sterile, beautiful art. They were exactly what I needed, a business with heavy equipment, significant insurance requirements, and a professional crew that would not be intimidated by a woman in a mother-of-the-bride dress. I bypassed their standard booking portal and used my Northbridge Capital credentials to find the contact for the principal, Daniel Reeves. I sent an email from my corporate account, not my personal one. Subject, private inquiry, Greywater Bay property, urgent project. He responded in 15 minutes. We met the next day at his downtown Seattle studio, a space of minimalist perfection, polished concrete floors, stark white walls, massive diffused lights. Daniel Reeves matched his brand. Late 40s, sharp, elegant, wearing a perfectly tailored black blazer over a simple gray shirt. He didn't waste time on small talk, which I appreciated. Ms. Hale, your email was concise. What's the project? I have an off-market property in Greywater Bay, I said, sliding a thin portfolio across the polished table. Professional shots I'd had taken for my insurance policy. I'm offering it gratis for a catalog shoot, but I have non-negotiable terms. He raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Gratis, in exchange for exclusive, uninterrupted use for one specific weekend, a full digital copy of the finalized portfolio for my private use, and absolute discretion. He studied the photos of the house, his expression unreadable. This is Catherine Hale's place, the one on the point, I tried to get in there for Architectural Digest 5 years ago. She turned me down flat. She was my grandmother, I said, and she valued privacy, as do I. The property has attracted some unwelcome assumptions recently. I need to establish a clear, legally binding prior engagement for the weekend of Friday, November 28th. Daniel looked up, his gaze analytical. He wasn't a gossip. He was a businessman sniffing out a complication. Assumptions? A family matter? A family matter, I said, my voice flat. They believe the house is available for an event. It is not. A flicker of understanding. You need a block, a professional one. You're not just offering a location, you're hiring us to occupy it. The shoot is the purpose, I corrected smoothly. My terms are the contract. A slow smile touched the corner of his mouth. You're from Northbridge Capital. You assess vulnerabilities. So, let's assess this. My crew, my gear. This is a $150,000 operation for a weekend. If we mobilize and your family matter shows up and gets in the way, I lose time and money. I can't have a screaming relative interrupting a $20,000 a day photographer. You won't, I said. That's what the contract is for. We drafted it right there. It was routed to his lawyer and to Marilyn Shaw, who reviewed it via a secure link within the hour. This wasn't a simple rental agreement. It was an exclusive license and service agreement, a technical document. The details were cold, precise, and designed to bite. Grant of license, Cassidy Hale, licensor. Grants Coastal Frame LLC, licensee, sole, exclusive, and uninterrupted access to the property located at address Greywater Bay, including all structures and grounds. Term, the license shall commence at 6 p.m. on Friday, November 28th, and terminate precisely at 6 p.m. on Sunday, November 30th. Access security, licensee is authorized to secure the premises against all unauthorized entry. Licensor will provide all keys and access codes. Licensee agrees to provide their own bonded professional security team, minimum 2 personnel, for the duration of the term to protect their equipment. Any individual not on the pre-approved crew list, to be filed as Appendix A, will be denied access and treated as a trespasser. Police notification licensee is authorized and required to file a notice of commercial filming activity and private security detail with the Greywater Bay Sheriff's Department, providing a copy of this agreement and the crew list. Insurance, licensee will provide a certificate of insurance for a $5 million general liability policy naming Cassidy Hale as an additional insured party. Cancellation penalty fee, this was the clause Marilyn insisted on. It was beautiful. Licensor agrees to pay a non-refundable service mobilization fee of $5,000 upon execution. Furthermore, should licensor, Cassidy Hale, breach this agreement or fail to provide exclusive access as stipulated, thereby causing a cancellation within the 72-hour operational window, licensor shall pay a liquidated damages penalty of $25,000 to licensee for mobilization, lost time, and project rescheduling. This was my shield. It was also my sword. If my mother, through some unforeseen emotional barrage, somehow broke me down and convinced me to cave, it would cost me $25,000. I was putting my own money on the line, building a firewall against my own potential for weakness. The penalty is the point, I told Daniel, answering his unasked question. It ensures my compliance as much as yours. It makes the contract unbreakable. He nodded, a look of pure professional respect in his eyes. I like it. It's clean. I authorized the $5,000 wire transfer from my personal account. The confirmation hit my inbox before I left his studio. You'll receive the crew list, 15 names, and the vehicle manifest by tomorrow, Daniel said, standing to shake my hand. My team will be on site at 1750 on the 28th to begin setup. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I appreciate your professionalism. Ms. Hale, he replied, I'm not just a professional, I'm a perfectionist. We will be uninterrupted and you will get your photos. By 4 p.m. that day, the agreement was countersigned, notarized by a mobile service, and a copy was electronically filed with the county recorder's office. It was now a public record, a prior lien attached to the property's deed history. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in methodical dismantling. I spent my days at Northbridge, modeling financial risk, and my evenings at Greywater Bay, sterilizing my life. I was systematic. I packed every personal photograph, every book, every piece of clothing. My grandmother's silver, which I'd used as my first excuse, was carefully bubble-wrapped and removed. I paid a bonded moving company to come on a Wednesday when I knew my mother and Leia were at a dress fitting. They transported my large oak desk, my ergonomic chair, my file cabinets, and my computers to a climate-controlled storage unit in Seattle. When I was done, the house was a sterile, beautiful shell. It was the Hale estate of my mother's imagination, a flawless, impersonal show home devoid of any trace of the woman who actually lived there. It was perfect for a high-end catalog shoot. It was also, I noted with a cold flicker of satisfaction, a terrible, echoing, and unwelcoming place for a wedding. There was no warmth left, no life, just angles and expensive, empty surfaces. My final piece of preparation was logistical. I went online and booked a room at the Harborview Hotel, the only other major structure on the bay, situated on the opposite point. My grandmother had always hated it, calling it an eyesore, but its single virtue was its clear, unobstructed, binocular distance view of my property. I booked a Bayview King Suite for Friday, November 28th, and Saturday, November 29th. I was the general, and this was my command post. I assembled a packet for Daniel Reeves containing 2 sets of high-security keys, the garage and gate codes, and the contact number for the property's caretaker, a local man I paid to check the pipes, not me. I included a brief, typed note. Mr. Reeves, thank you for your business. All access codes and keys are enclosed. My caretaker has been notified of your team's arrival. I will be unreachable on a corporate assignment in Europe until Monday. Best, C. Hale. I messengered the packet to his studio. I did not mention a wedding. I did not mention my family. My side of the transaction was complete. All legal tracks were laid, running parallel to my mother's delusional ones, but mine were made of steel. The call came exactly as I knew it would. Thursday night, the night before the wedding weekend. I was in my Seattle apartment, checking the charge on my best pair of binoculars. My phone buzzed, caller ID, Margaret Hale. This was the moment, the final test of the she wouldn't dare say no theory. I let it ring 3 times, took a steadying breath, and answered, my voice perfectly neutral. Hi, Mom. Cassidy, thank God. Her voice was a whirlwind of false energy, the kind she used when stressed but pretending to be in control. I've been calling the house phone. Why don't you answer? Listen, I'm sending over the final vendor list. I need you to be at the house all day tomorrow to let them in. The flowers arrive at 8 a.m., and the tent company needs the entire lawn staked out before 10. The caterer will be there by 11. She was giving me orders, a logistics manager assigning tasks to an unpaid intern. I need you to be there. I can't, I said. The line went utterly silent, so quiet I could hear the tiny digital echo of her breathing. What? She finally said, the words small and sharp. What do you mean you can't? I'm at the airport, I said. It was a perfect, clean, beautiful lie. I'm flying to Zurich for an emergency risk assessment. A client's portfolio is collapsing. I won't be back until Monday. Zurich? Her voice spiked into a near shriek. Zurich, Cassidy? You cannot be serious. This is your sister's wedding. I need you at the house. I'm sorry, Mom. It's a mandatory work trip, unavoidable. You said you and the planner would handle all the little details, so I assumed you had it covered. I figured you didn't need me, but the house, the vendors, who is going to let them in? The doors are locked, she stammered, the panic finally breaking through her imperious composure. I don't know, Mom. I'm afraid I can't help you. My flight is boarding. Cassidy, you will not do this to me. You call your work right now. You tell them, I can't. This is a $1 billion account. Mom, I have to go. But the house, Leia, the guests, I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said, my voice suddenly as cold and calm as the wind off the bay. You always do. Good luck with the wedding. I hung up. The bluff was complete. I wasn't at the airport. I was 20 floors above downtown, looking at the city lights. And tomorrow I wouldn't be in Zurich. I'd be at the Harborview Hotel with a cup of black coffee, watching the show. My mother thought her only obstacle was a locked door. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, the property would no longer be hers to enter. The contract was about to bite. My Zurich bluff hung in the air, a perfect, cold fabrication. I had just hung up on my mother, her panic still echoing in my ear, when my phone vibrated again. I glanced at the screen, expecting Margaret's name to flash, a second, more desperate wave of attack, but it was Leia. My finger hovered over the decline button. I was in execution mode, my bag was packed for the Harborview Hotel, my data was secure, my contract was filed. Leia was part of the operation I was dismantling, not someone to console. But it was 11:45 p.m. This was not a call about flower arrangements, this was a distress signal. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Cass, are you really at the airport? Are you in Zurich?" Her voice was small, thin, stripped of the bridal confidence I'd heard in my dining room. "I'm handling a work crisis, Leia," I said, my voice non-committal. "Oh God, she's losing her mind, Cass. She wasn't crying, not yet, she was reporting. She's in the car. I think she's driving to your house right now. She said she'd call a locksmith. She said you've betrayed the family." "There's nothing for me to say about that, Leia." No, I know." She paused. I heard her take a long, shuddering breath, as if she were about to dive into cold water. I just wanted to say thank you. The word was so unexpected, it wrong-footed me completely." "Thank you for what?" For being you, the strong one, our amazing older sister." It was a phrase I'd heard my whole life, but it had always been weaponized. The preamble to an unreasonable request. "You're so strong, Cassidy, you won't mind if we... You're so responsible, Cassidy, you'll handle this." This time it sounded like an epitaph. "Leia, what's wrong? I'm sitting in my apartment," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And I'm surrounded by things, boxes and boxes of crystal glasses I hate, a seating chart for people I've never met, this $8,000 dress that feels like a costume. Mom helped me choose everything. She helped me choose the venue. She helped me choose the invitations." Her voice cracked, a single sharp fracture. "I don't think I'm happy, Cass. I don't think I've made a single decision about my own life in 5 years. Maybe not even about Evan." A cold, familiar dread settled in my stomach. This was the Leia crisis, the part in the family play where I was supposed to step in, smooth things over, and guide her back to the approved script. "He's all she talks about," Leia continued, the words tumbling out now. "How successful he is, how perfect he is for the Hale legacy, but he's not, is he?" She wasn't really asking me, she was asking the universe. "He's avoidant, Cass. Whenever I try to talk about, I don't know, real things, like money or where we'll actually live, he makes a joke, he checks his watch. He starts telling some story about a high-net-worth client he's landing. It's all a show, it's performance." She let out a small, wet sniff. "You know that really expensive-looking wine he always brings to dinner? The one he says is from an exclusive Napa vineyard? I was upset last night and I Googled the label. It's $12 a bottle, Merlot, from a mass-market distributor. He lies about small things, about big things. It's all for show." This was it. The pivot point. The old Cassidy, the responsible one, would have jumped in right here. She would have said, "Oh, Leia, all men are like that. He's just trying to impress you. Mom means well. It's just wedding jitters. It'll all be fine." I would have done my job. I would have managed the risk. I would have absorbed her doubt and fed back a platitude. But the old Cassidy was gone. She'd been packed away with the rest of the personal effects and put in climate-controlled storage. My own voice, when it came, was quiet, colder than I intended. "Leia, I'm not in Zurich. I'm in my apartment, and I can't tell you what to do, but I can ask you 2 questions." "Okay," she whispered. "First, do you love him? Not the show, not the legacy, not the expensive suit or the cheap wine. Do you love the man, Evan Cole?" The silence on the line was a physical wait. It stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. I could hear the faint sound of traffic from her downtown apartment, a single sharp exhale, not an answer. "Second," I continued, "are you free to choose right now? If you wanted to call all 200 of those guests and the caterer and your mother and tell them it's all off, could you? Or are you just the guest of honor at a party your mother is throwing for herself?" The silence this time was different. It wasn't the sound of someone thinking, it was the sound of something breaking. When she spoke, her voice was unrecognizable. A brittle, bitter laugh punched out of her. "Free to choose! That's adorable, Cass. Really, we're Hales. Mom is Mom." Her voice hardened, adopting a cynical, world-weary tone that chilled me to the bone. This is just adult reality, isn't it? This is what it means to grow up. You make the best choice you can, and you smile, and you show up." No, I thought. That's not adult reality. That's our reality. The specific, toxic ecosystem Margaret built, the one I fed and watered for 2 decades by being the strong one. That's a choice, Leia, I said, but it's not reality. I have to go. Wait, she almost shouted. Cass, what's going to happen on Friday at the house? Mom, is she really going to call a locksmith? Is she going to break down the door? I have secured the property, I said. It was a statement of fact, not a threat. Good night, Leia. I hung up before she could reply. I stood in the darkness of my apartment, the floor-to-ceiling windows showing a city of indifferent lights. The phone call hadn't felt like a victory, it felt like listening to a casualty report from a war I had just escalated. My mind went tumbling back, a rapid, unbidden slideshow of my responsibilities. I wasn't remembering violence or cruelty. My childhood had no dramatic scars. It was just a long, gray, oppressive weight. It was me at 13, sitting at the kitchen table with the household checkbook, balancing my mother's extravagant accounts because my father just couldn't handle the conflict, and I was so good with numbers. It was me at 22, driving to Leia's dorm at 3 a.m. to pick her up after she'd wrecked her car, lying to our parents that I had been the one to hit a patch of ice, taking the insurance hit and the screaming lecture from my mother about irresponsibility because Leia couldn't have this on her record. It was every single holiday, every birthday, every family dinner where I was the designated driver, the conflict mediator, the one who listened, the one who absorbed, the one who handled it. I was never a participant in my family. I was its infrastructure. I was the load-bearing wall, expected to stand silent and strong while they lived their colorful, dramatic, messy lives, decorating the rooms I held up. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. I thought about the house in Greywater Bay. My grandmother, Catherine, hadn't just left me a piece of real estate, she had left me a weapon, a fortress. She had seen my mother, her own daughter-in-law, with perfect, terrifying clarity. The will hadn't just been a transfer of title, it had been an instruction. Marilyn's voice echoed in my head. Don't burn the bridge, Cassidy. Let them collapse it. My lie about Zurich wasn't burning the bridge, it was just me finally stepping off it. Margaret was the one already speeding toward the ravine, her foot flooring the accelerator, convinced the bridge would simply reappear because she willed it to. I felt a sudden, sharp, agonizing stab of pity. Not for my mother, but for Leia, who was now sitting in a room full of boxes, clutching a $12 bottle of fake wine, about to marry a man she didn't love, all because she was too terrified to say no. My actions tomorrow would detonate her life. The humiliation would be public and profound. I was about to destroy her perfect day, the one she was clinging to as adult reality. I closed my eyes. The old instinct was still there, a dying ghost in my nerves, whispering, "Call Daniel Reeves. Pay the $25,000 penalty. It's just money. Let her have the house. Let her have her show." I opened my eyes. No. What was I saving her from? A marriage built on a financial lie and emotional cowardice, a future as Margaret's primary puppet, a role I was finally abdicating. The truth, however brutal, was a cleaner blade. The humiliation I was about to inflict was acute, but the life I was saving her from was a chronic disease. I had spent 34 years being the kind one, the pragmatic one, the one who never ever made a wave. I finally understood. Kindness without a boundary is just enablement. Being gentle doesn't mean you don't have teeth. It just means you choose very carefully when to bite. I picked up my overnight bag, the binoculars safely packed inside. I walked out of my apartment, my face set, my resolve as cold and hard as the notarized contract. The time for analysis was over. The bluff was set. Tomorrow I would be at the Harbor View Hotel, and I would watch them hit the steel. I zipped the overnight bag, binoculars, chargers, a change of clothes, and the encrypted SSD drive containing the audio files. My conversation with Leia echoed in my head, her brittle, cynical laugh. "This is just adult reality, isn't it?" My hand hovered over the bag. I was missing the final piece of the dossier. I walked to the steel fireproof safe concealed behind a bookcase in my study and keyed in the code. Inside, next to the hard-copy deed of the Greywater house and the printed transcripts of my mother's audio, was a small, dark, velvet ring box. Beside it lay a single, tri-folded document bearing the embossed letterhead of Maxwell & Sons Jewelers. My pity for Leia, that sharp, agonizing pang I'd felt earlier, evaporated. It was replaced by the cold, clean focus of a professional risk assessment. Her call hadn't been a shock. Her doubts hadn't surprised me. I had been waiting for them because I knew, with the certainty of a notarized document, that her entire engagement was a fabrication. The investigation had started 3 weeks ago during the sterilization of my house, as I was systematically emptying my life into labeled boxes. I was in my master bedroom, clearing my grandmother's heavy mahogany jewelry chest, when I saw it, sitting brazenly on the polished wood next to my grandmother's pearls, Laya's engagement ring. It was an obnoxious thing, a massive cushion-cut stone that flashed with an almost too perfect glassy fire, set on a platinum band crusted with smaller stones. I knew instantly what had happened. Leia, during one of her unauthorized planning sessions, had undoubtedly been in my room, trying on my grandmother's heirloom pieces, another small, infuriating trespass, and had left her own ring behind. I picked it up. It felt light. The stone, when I looked at it under the clear light of the bay window, seemed hollow. I'm an analyst. I spend my days looking for the discrepancy between a prospectus and reality. I spot high-grade fakes, whether they're in a financial report or on my dresser. This ring was a performance. I didn't call her. I didn't text my mother. I slipped it into my pocket. The next morning, I wasn't at Northbridge. I was at Maxwell & Sons in downtown Seattle, old world, discreet, the jewelers who had handled my grandmother's estate jewelry for decades. "Mr. Davies," I said to the senior gemologist, who greeted me warmly. "Miss Hale, a pleasure. What can we do for you?" "I need a formal appraisal on a family piece," I said, sliding the ring across the velvet mat for insurance purposes. He picked it up, his expression neutral, and fitted a loop to his eye. He turned it over, examined the setting, and breathed on the stone. The silence in the private viewing room stretched. He didn't look up, he just quietly said, "One moment." He was gone for 10 minutes. When he returned, his professional, placid mask was firmly in place, the look of a man about to deliver diplomatic, expensive bad news. "Miss Hale," he began, placing the ring carefully on the mat, "this is a very well-crafted piece of costume jewelry." I didn't react, I just waited. "The setting," he continued, "is not platinum. It is high-grade 55 sterling silver, plated to look like platinum, a fine job. The side stones are well-set crystal, and the center stone—" "The center stone?" I asked. "The center stone is a superb quality cubic zirconia, 4-carat equivalent, a very good one, but it is not a diamond." "What is its value for insurance replacement?" I asked, a subtle code for the truth. He nodded, understanding. As a piece of silver and CZ jewelry, its retail replacement value would be approximately $450. $450. The ring that had accompanied the $8,000 dress. The ring that was the centerpiece of the Hale legacy wedding. The ring Evan Cole had supposedly procured through his high-net-worth connections. "I need the formal appraisal document," I said, stating those facts. "Of course, Ms. Hale. I'll have it typed and stamped immediately." That document was now in my hand, Dossier Exhibit C, and it had been the key. The ring wasn't an unfortunate choice, it was a symptom. It confirmed my flashing red light assessment of Evan Cole. He wasn't just tacky, he was a con artist. That night, my Zurich bluff still weeks away from being needed, I didn't just run a background check. I ran a full, deep-dive forensic analysis, the kind I'd run on a hostile acquisition target. This wasn't personal, it was professional. I started with public records. It was astonishingly easy. Evan Cole was not a ghost. He was a disaster. Data point 1. King County public court records showed 2 eviction notices from luxury high-rise apartments in the last 18 months, both for non-payment of rent. Data point 2. U.S. Bankruptcy Court, Western District of Washington, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing, discharged 4 years prior, total unsecured debt, $184,000, primarily credit cards and personal loans. Data point 3. Civil judgments, a lien from the Ridgeline Yacht Club, a place my mother loved to be seen, for $14,000 in unpaid membership dues and house bar tabs. He hadn't just visited, he dined and dashed on a corporate level. He wasn't private about his wealth, he was insolvent. Next, I moved to his digital footprint, his real product. His Instagram, the one Leia and my mother followed, was a carefully curated fantasy. Data point 4, social media forensics, that photo of him on the bow of a super yacht in the Mediterranean. I ran a reverse image search. It was a repost from a Russian travel blogger, originally posted in 2018. He'd just cropped the blogger out. That picture of his watch, a Patek Philippe next to a bottle of rare whiskey? The image was stolen from a luxury watch forum. The client dinners at Canlis? All reposts from local food critics, tagged with #goals or #thelife. He wasn't living a luxurious life, he was creating a PowerPoint deck of one, built from other people's photos. He was selling a story. Finally, I analyzed his primary asset, his job. Data point 5, LinkedIn and corporate records. His profile was a masterpiece of empty jargon, principal at EC Capital Partners, specializing in high-net-worth acquisitions and private equity. EC Capital Partners, according to the Delaware Secretary of State website, was a shell LLC registered 3 years ago for a $90 filing fee. It had no website, no SEC filings, no physical address. I used my Northbridge access to a professional verification service to check the company he claimed he'd worked for before going out on his own. The HR verification line was automated. I keyed in his social security number, which I'd pulled from the bankruptcy filing. The automated voice was clear. "We have no record of employment for this individual." The picture was complete. Evan Cole was a predator, a sophisticated, charismatic grifter who was likely drowning in new debt. He had found the perfect mark, not Leah. Leah was just the delivery mechanism. His true target was Margaret Hale. My mother, with her desperate, pathological need for social validation, had done all the work for him. She had broadcasted the Hale legacy, claimed the Hale estate, my house, as a family asset in magazines, presented her family as old money, powerful, and, most importantly, liquid. Evan wasn't marrying Leah for her personality. He was executing a merger. He thought he was acquiring a multi-million-dollar waterfront compound, a family line of credit, and a network of my mother's wealthy, gullible friends. He was leveraging my mother's lies to finance his own. They were a perfect, symbiotic match. I took the appraisal document and the velvet box and placed them in the go bag on top of the binoculars. I sent a single encrypted email to Marilyn Shaw. Subject, FOD, Evan Cole Assessment. Body, Marilyn, the situation has evolved. The fiancé is a fraud. The engagement ring is CZ. I have the formal appraisal plus his bankruptcy file, eviction history, and proof of employment fabrication. This is no longer just a family property dispute. This is a performance of interlocking fraud. The package is attached. No action needed. This is for your records. Her reply came back in 2 minutes. Good God, Cassidy, you're not just reclaiming a house, you're fumigating it. Proceed. This was why my call with Leah had been so final. Her late-night admission of doubt wasn't a cry for help. It was the last, dying flicker of her own intuition before she willfully extinguished it. When I'd asked her, "Do you love him?" I already knew him was a fictional character. I already knew, from the $12 wine she'd spotted, that she suspected it too. The question that hung in the air of my apartment was simple. Why not just tell her? Why not send her the file, show her the $450 appraisal, and spare her the public humiliation? The thought had crossed my mind, but my training told me it was the wrong move, the high-risk, low-reward path. If I sent that file to Leah now, in the dead of night, what would happen? She would confront Evan. He would lie, charm her, gaslight her, tell her I was the jealous, vindictive sister trying to sabotage her happiness. She would run to our mother, and Margaret, presented with a choice between a humiliating, fraudulent truth and a beautiful, high-status lie, would choose the lie, every time. They would unite against me. The truth, delivered privately, would be labeled an attack. No, the truth, to be believed, had to be revealed in a secure, controlled environment. The lies had to be dismantled publicly, piece by piece, leaving no room for narrative spin. Evan and my mother had built this stage set. They had printed the programs, sold the tickets. The show had to happen. The wedding had to fail, not because I stopped it, but because it was built on a foundation that couldn't support its own weight. Only then, when the entire glittering, fraudulent structure collapsed around her, would Leah finally be free. I zipped the bag. The ring was a lie. The fiancé was a lie. The family house was a lie. My job tomorrow wasn't just to reclaim my property, it was to be the single, immovable, factual object that the entire performance would crash against. I checked into the Harbor View King Suite at 5 p.m. on Friday, November 28th. The room was sterile, anonymous, and perfect, smelling of industrial-grade disinfectant and the faint, sharp tang of the low tide. I didn't unpack my bag. I walked directly to the balcony, slid the heavy glass door open, and stepped out into the cold, damp air. Across the bay, my house stood on its point, a dark silhouette against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. It looked quiet, empty, waiting. I raised the binoculars, my hand perfectly steady. I was not a participant, I was an observer, a risk analyst watching a variable in real time. At 17:50, 10 minutes early, a black Suburban with tinted windows rolled up my driveway. A man in a dark polo shirt stepped out, clearly security, walked the perimeter, checking the locks and the garage. At 6 p.m., on the dot, the first production van from Coastal Frame LLC arrived, followed by a large, unmarked truck. The team moved with the quiet, unnerving efficiency of a military unit, no shouting, no wasted motion. The security lead met the production manager, keys were exchanged. A generator, somewhere out of my sight, hummed to life, and then, room by room, my house lit up, not with the warm, inviting glow I associated with home, but with the harsh, blue-white glare of professional work lights. They planted small, laminated signs at the base of my driveway, just behind the gate. I focused the binoculars, the red letters were stark, private property, no trespassing, production in progress. They strung a single, tight line of yellow caution tape between the stone pillars of my gate. The occupation was complete. I waited. Around 9:30 p.m., just as I'd anticipated, headlights sliced through the darkness, my mother's white Escalade. It pulled up to the gate, stopping so abruptly the nose of the vehicle dipped. She got out and marched to the yellow tape. She looked at the sign, at the brightly lit house, now bustling with strangers. She stopped, her body language screaming confusion. This wasn't the plan. The plan was a dark house and a locked door she could break. I saw her pull out her phone, her face illuminated by its screen. She was calling me, the Zurich number. I watched her hold the phone to her ear, listen, then pull it away and stare at it, enraged. She tried again, pacing in front of the gate, a caged, furious animal, finally defeated by a piece of laminated paper and a 150-pound line of plastic tape. She got back in her car and sped away. Phase 1 was complete. I slept for 4 hours. I was awake at 5 a.m. on Saturday, the wedding day. I ordered black coffee from room service and sat on the balcony. The sun rose, burning the fog off the water, revealing a day of piercing, brilliant, unsympathetic beauty. At 6 a.m., the rest of the convoy arrived at my house. 3 massive equipment trucks, the 15-person crew, photographers, lighting technicians, stylists, even 2 models, spilled out and passed the security checkpoint. They began unloading stands, heavy-duty cables, and massive silver-backed diffusion panels. They were setting up the first shot on my main lawn, the exact manicured rectangle of grass my mother had designated for the ceremony. At 8:15 a.m., a Greywater Bay sheriff's cruiser rolled up, lights off. This was the first critical test. I held my breath. A single deputy stepped out and walked calmly to the gate. The security guard met him, holding a clipboard. I knew what was on it: the notarized contract, the filed police notification, the crew manifest, and Daniel Reeves's insurance certificate. The deputy read, taking his time. He looked at the house, at the trucks, at his own notes. He spoke to the guard for perhaps 2 minutes, a calm, professional exchange. Then he nodded, handed the clipboard back, got in his cruiser, and drove away. The legal perimeter was now reinforced by the state. My steel trap was set and armed. For the next 2 hours, I watched them work. They laid dolly tracks across the grass where the aisle was meant to be. They positioned a 12-foot-high lighting rig where the string quartet was supposed to sit. They were professionals, and they were, in their complete indifference, my perfect, unwitting army. At 10:29 a.m. they arrived. I saw the white ribbon first, fluttering from the antenna of my mother's Escalade. She was leading the procession. Behind her, a gleaming white vintage Bentley, undoubtedly carrying Leia. Behind that, a long, black stretch limousine for the bridal party. A perfect, hopeful, doomed parade. The Escalade stopped short of the tape. My mother's door flew open before the vehicle had even fully stopped. She emerged, not in her final dress, but in a chaotic flurry of a silk robe and hair curlers, a cell phone already pressed to her ear. She looked stunned. This wasn't a locked door, this was an army. "Excuse me!" Her voice was a faint, sharp shriek carried across the water. "Get out of the way! You are in the way!" The security guard, a large, impassive man, simply stepped forward and raised his hand, palm out, a universal gesture of stop. The production manager, a woman with a headset and the clipboard, walked calmly to the gate. "Ma'am, this is a private closed location shoot." "This is my house!" Margaret screamed, a raw, guttural sound. "My family's house! We have a wedding, 200 guests. You need to leave now." The manager didn't argue or raise her voice. She simply held the clipboard out, pointing to the contract, pointing to my signature. My mother's face was a kaleidoscope of collapsing realities, confusion, disbelief, dawning, horrific understanding, and a surge of pure apoplectic rage. She jabbed a finger at the manager. "I don't care about your paper. I'm calling the police. I'm calling my daughter." She stabbed at her phone. I watched, fascinated. She was calling me, the daughter in Zurich, the daughter who wasn't answering. Her face grew redder. She paced in frantic circles on the public road, her silk robe flapping, a tableau of pure, undone panic. At 10:35 a.m., the first guest shuttle, a 50-passenger bus, rolled up behind the limousine. The doors hissed open. Guests in bright dresses and pressed suits began to filter out, blinking in the sunlight. They saw the chaos, the massive trucks, the security, my mother screaming into a phone in her bathrobe. And then, like a single choreographed move, the phones came out. Dozens of them, lifted, small black mirrors capturing the scene. The guests weren't helping, they were recording. The public humiliation, the collateral damage my mother had always used as a weapon against me, had just turned on her. At 10:40 a.m., the door of the vintage Bentley opened. Leia emerged, a cloud of white veil and beaded silk, the $8,000 dress. She stepped out, not onto a carpet of roses, but onto the gritty, oil-stained asphalt of the coastal road. I watched the pristine white hem of that expensive dress drag in the dirt, a single, visceral, agonizing cut. She was a ghost, a prop, a child in a costume. Her hands, holding a bouquet, went to her mouth. She looked at the trucks, at her screaming mother, at the line of security. Her entire adult reality was dissolving in front of her. At 10:41 a.m., the limousine door opened. Evan Cole got out, looking sharp in his tuxedo. He assessed the scene in a single, sweeping glance. He saw the production trucks, not floral vans. He saw the professional security. He saw the size, the scale, the expense of the operation facing him. He saw the police would be useless. He saw his primary asset, my house, the Hale estate, was gone. He did not go to Leia. He did not go to Margaret. He turned his back to his bride, pulled his own phone from his pocket, put it to his ear, and walked 10 paces away, speaking urgently. He wasn't comforting, he wasn't managing, he was divesting. The merger was off. At 10:45 a.m., the sheriff's cruiser returned. My mother must have called 911. The same deputy stepped out. Margaret rushed him, her voice cracking, gesticulating wildly at the house, at the crew, at the contract. The deputy held up a hand. He listened patiently, then walked past her, spoke briefly to the production manager again, and turned to face the crowd. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. His voice was the calm, amplified voice of the law. "Folks, this property is under a legally binding exclusive lease for a commercial production. We have verified the documentation. The production company are the legal tenants. Anyone attempting to cross this perimeter will be trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to clear the public roadway and disperse." Disperse. It was not a request, it was an order. The word hit the crowd like a physical blow. The wedding wasn't delayed, it wasn't moving inside. It was over. It did not exist. The guests began to murmur, a low, embarrassed hum. They turned, a slow, collective retreat back to their cars, back to the shuttle, phones still held high, capturing the final, pathetic moments. Evan finished his call, straightened his tuxedo jacket, looked once, a cold, final glance, at Leia's back, then walked to the black limousine, got in, and shut the door. Margaret Hale stood alone in the middle of the road, her arms limp at her sides, her face a white mask of ruin. Leia hadn't moved. She was just a statue of white silk, soiled at the hem, staring at the yellow tape that separated her from a life that was never real. At 11 a.m., the road was clearing. The wedding had evaporated. Across the bay, on my lawn, I saw a flicker of movement. A technician adjusted a massive silver panel, angling the harsh, beautiful sunlight. A photographer shouted a direction, and the crew, indifferent to the broken pieces of my family on the road, continued their work. I lowered the binoculars, my arms aching, and stepped back inside my hotel room, sliding the heavy glass door shut. cutting off the sound of the surf. It was done. I stayed in the Harbor View suite for the rest of Saturday. I did not check out. I didn't answer the 58 frantic, incoherent text messages from my father or the 11 voicemails, each one a different shade of hysteria, from my mother. I was, after all, in an emergency meeting in Zurich. I watched the production crew for Coastal Frame LLC, my saviors in matching black polo shirts, as they meticulously finished their work. They broke down the lighting rigs, packed the cameras, and swept the lawn clean, their professionalism an antiseptic to the emotional filth of the morning. By 6 p.m., on Sunday, as per the contract, they were gone. The house, from my vantage point across the bay, was dark and silent once more. The legal perimeter had dissolved, the house was mine again, but the war had just moved to a new theater. Around 2 p.m., on Saturday, while the crew was still shooting the master bedroom, the digital aftershock began. It started not as a wave, but as a tremor. A single 30-second video posted to TikTok by a guest named Seattle Sarah 123. It was a masterpiece of unintentional, brutal storytelling. It opened on my mother, her face contorted, screaming, "This is my house!" in her silk robe. It panned to the impassive security guard, then to the arriving deputy. It zoomed in on Laya, a perfect, tragic statue of white silk, her dress pooling in the dirt. It climaxed with the deputy's amplified voice cutting through the chaos. "Clear the public roadway and disperse." The caption was simple: "Craziest wedding ever. Bride's family gets kicked out of their own house by police. Be Greywater wedding gate a wedding fail, #Karen." I watched it. Then I watched it again. By 4 p.m., it had 50,000 views. By 8 p.m., it had been ripped, remixed with the Oh No song, and reposted to Instagram, where it broke 1 million. By Sunday morning, #Greywater wedding gate was the #1 trending topic in Seattle. The comment section was a battlefield, a raw dissection of my family fought by strangers. The split was binary. Team Margaret, what kind of heartless monster does this to their own sister on her wedding day? It's just a house. This is unforgivable. That poor, beautiful bride. That sister is a sociopath. I hope her family disowns her. Team Cassidy, a smaller but more analytical group, NTA. The mother in the bathrobe screaming, "My house feels off." That's not the vibe of an actual owner. Hold on. The caption says bride's family. What about the bride's sister? Who? Wait, I Googled it. That house isn't the family's. It belongs to the other sister, the one who wasn't there. Why wasn't she there? Was she even invited? My quiet, contractual maneuver had become a public referendum on family dynamics. The local blogs pounced. The Puget Sound Ledger ran an opinion piece entitled Parents' Final Boundaries, Why the Greywater Wedding Gate is a Parable for Our Times. A therapist on YouTube, Dr. Cindy Explains, posted a 20-minute reaction video titled, "A Psychologist Breaks Down the Narcissistic Family System in Viral Wedding Video." My mother's Hale legacy was now a case study in public humiliation. I knew she wouldn't stand for it. She would never apologize. She would never admit the truth. She would escalate. On Sunday afternoon, she did. A new post appeared on her Facebook page, public. The photo she chose was a work of genius, an old picture, taken 6 years ago during her gallbladder surgery. She was in a hospital bed, looking pale and wan, an IV line visible in her hand. The text was a tactical nuke. "To all our dear friends and family who have been so supportive, my heart is broken by the cruel, vicious, and misleading videos circulating online. My only crime was wanting to give my youngest daughter one perfect day. What those videos don't show, what no one knows, is the private, agonizing battle I have been fighting. For the last 3 months, I have been privately battling a terrifying diagnosis: Stage 3 ovarian cancer. We wanted to have the wedding at our beloved family home, a place of healing and memories, before I start the aggressive chemotherapy next week. The stress, the confusion, the legal misunderstanding over the house, it was all orchestrated to hurt us in our time of deepest need. We have been shattered. We ask for privacy, for prayers, and only if you can find it in your heart, for help with the crushing medical bills that have already begun to pile up. God bless." And there it was, the link, a brand new, freshly minted GoFundMe page, the Margaret Hale Healing Fund. Goal, $100,000. I stared at the screen. I was not angry, I was impressed. In a single move, she had reframed the entire narrative. She was no longer the entitled, screaming aggressor. She was a dying matriarch. I was no longer the daughter enforcing a boundary. I was a monster withholding a dying wish and kicking a cancer patient off her property. This was not a social battle. This was no longer a property dispute. This was federal wire fraud. My Zurich trip was over. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying. The risk analyst was back on the clock. Hypothesis: Margaret Hale is not sick. Action: verify. I didn't need to do much digging. My mother's entire life was a public performance. I opened my encrypted evidence drive and created a new subfolder, Dossier D, Fraud. Exhibit D1. I went to her closest friend, Cynthia Davies's public Facebook page, dated October 4th, 3 weeks ago, an album titled Ridgeline Gala. There was Margaret in a backless, sequined red dress, champagne flute in hand, dancing. The caption, "Dancing the night away with my bestie Margaret. So much fun!" Hashtag Hale Legacy, hashtag Charity Ball. Exhibit D2. I went to the Instagram page for Bella Vita Salon and Spa, my mother's preferred temple of vanity, dated October 14th, 1 week ago. A tagged photo, so excited to give the wonderful Margaret Hale her full pre-wedding glam package, getting her ready for her daughter's big day. "You look radiant, Margaret." She was in a fluffy white robe, smiling, her face covered in a gold-flecked mask. Exhibit D3, my own inbox, an email from my father's golf club, sent 2 days ago. Subject: holiday wine tasting event. "Dear Howard and Margaret, we look forward to seeing you both." She wasn't battling stage 3 cancer. She was battling laugh lines and a tough tea time. I saved the screenshots, archived the URLs, and saved a complete PDF of the GoFundMe page, including the initial burst of donations, $4,350 in the first hour. The comments were a river of misplaced sympathy. "Margaret, you brave soul. We are praying for you. I am disgusted by what your daughter did. Absolutely sociopathic behavior." I picked up the phone and called Marilyn. "She's claiming stage 3 ovarian cancer," I said, "and she's started a GoFundMe." The line was silent. When Marilyn spoke, all the folksy bake sale charm was gone. Her voice was pure, cold, prosecutorial ice. "Cassidy, listen to me very carefully. This is a felony, obtaining money by false pretenses, which is theft. And because she's using an online platform, it's wire fraud, which is a federal crime. This is no longer family drama, this is prison time." "What do I do, Marilyn? Do I post my proof? Do I call her?" "You do nothing," she commanded. "Not publicly. You do not confront her. You do not warn her. You let her dig. You let her collect the money. You archive every single donation, every comment. You are building a new case file. This is not for a family argument. This is for the state attorney general. Let her commit the crime fully and completely. Then we report it to GoFundMe's trust and safety team and law enforcement simultaneously. We have her on fraud, and we have her on libel. Do not tip your hand." I hung up and went back to my evidence folder. I added the salon photo, the gala photo, and re-archived the original Seattle Coast Living article that called my house the family estate. I added the physical, scanned copy of the wedding invitation that listed my address as the venue. The file was getting thick. Then, in the deluge of sympathetic comments on my mother's GoFundMe, a new voice appeared, a small crack in her narrative wall. A comment from Helen Hale, my father's second cousin from Oregon, a quiet, religious woman I hadn't seen in years, posted directly on the GoFundMe link. "Margaret, my goodness, I am so terribly sorry to hear of this devastating illness. I am praying for your full recovery. I am, however, a bit confused. I was at dear Catherine's funeral 5 years ago. I seem to recall her will being very clear that she left that beautiful house on the bay and all its contents directly and solely to Cassidy. I am praying for your health, Margaret, but I'm also praying for the truth here, as it all seems very upsetting." It was a polite, devastating, precision-guided missile. The replies to Helen's comment began almost immediately. "Wait, what? It's not the family's house? If it's Cassidy's house, why would they plan a wedding there without her? Is the mom lying about the house? If she's lying about the house, is she—" The public narrative was beginning to fracture.